the unspoken language of power. Have you ever truly noticed certain men in a room? Not the loudest ones, not the ones begging for validation or even those fighting to be seen. No, I'm talking about the ones who simply withdraw. They don't raise their voice, they don't plead for your approval, they don't argue, explain, or justify, they just recede. And when they do, something utterly unsettling takes hold. The air itself seems to chill. People around them grow restless, their chatter fading in the silence that lingers. It screams louder than any outburst ever could. That's not surrender. That's not passivity. That's a deeply calculated power. Machiavelli, the old master himself, understood this in his bones. To him, stepping back isn't a retreat. It's a form of domination through absence. He once penned, "A prince must know how to disappear without losing his influence." Because absence, when wielded with intent, transforms into a mirror. And in that reflection, people don't just see you. They're forced to confront their own dependency, their entitlement, their stark discomfort with no longer having access to what they once took for granted. See, folks don't fear losing your love. They fear losing their grip on you. They don't genuinely miss you. They miss their ability to summon you at will, to bend your will to theirs. And if you've been that guy, the one who always shows up, who answers every call even when it drains your very soul, who explains himself just to keep the peace, then you haven't been loved. You've been utilized. In Machiavelli's world, predictability isn't a virtue, it's a liability. The man who is always available is never truly feared, and a man who isn't feared in some fundamental way is always controlled. You might believe your kindness builds connections, right? But kindness without boundaries, it breeds contempt. You become background noise and emotional valet at their beck and call. And every single time you utter yes when your spirit was screaming nothing at all, you trade a piece of your inherent dignity for a fleeting, hollow sense of being needed. Machiavelli would label that weakness dressed up as virtue. He'd look you in the eye and declare, never allow your value to be measured by your willingness to please. When you're constantly there, you forfeit your leverage. You extinguish your scarcity. And make no mistake, scarcity is the unshakable bedrock of true influence. So the next time that urge swells within you to over-explain, to validate your intentions, to reassure people who've never once offered you reassurance, don't. Instead, disappear. Not as an act of petty revenge, but as a strategic refinement. It's a reintroduction of yourself as a man who is no longer a servant to their ever-present demands, but a sovereign force whose silence now resonates louder than any words he ever spoke. Silence isn't cowardice, it's evolution. It's that pivotal moment you stop reacting and start positioning. The instant you become unpredictable, unreachable, untouchable. And that's when the world truly takes notice. Because when you vanish without a trace, they're not left wondering what happened to you. They're left desperately wondering what profound power you've unearthed that finally made you stop explaining yourself. The cost of constant availability. If this resonates somewhere deep inside you, I urge you to consider this. I disappear to reclaim my power. And if the path of silent strategy calls to you, then subscribe. Not to follow the noise, but to rise decisively above it, to become the kind of man who no longer chases respect. He commands it simply by vanishing. To truly thrive in a world obsessed with appearances, you must shed the naive illusion that goodness alone will shield you. Because the truth, raw and brutal, is this: being merely useful isn't power. Being predictable isn't loyalty. And being perpetually available is the absolute death of respect. From the moment you drew your first breath, you were subtly, continuously trained to be agreeable. Say yes. Don't make waves. Show up early. Answer quickly. Apologize even when you're not wrong. But Machiavelli, he'd simply smirk at such conditioning. He never championed moral submission. He championed power management. And if you're always accessible, always explaining, you've already abandoned the very throne of your own life. Because the man who makes himself cheap will never ever be treated as rare. You might believe your lightning-fast replies demonstrate commitment. You might think your constant availability forges deep connections. But what it actually builds is expectation. And expectation without fail murders appreciation. Machiavelli saw right through this charade. He wrote, "The man who seeks to be loved by all becomes the slave of the ungrateful." Because people don't respect the man who always says yes, they exploit him. And here's precisely how it plays out. They send a message and you respond within seconds. They complain and you explain. They stir up chaos and you provide peace. You become their personal crisis manager, their validation machine, their disposable shield against the slightest discomfort. But understand this: you weren't born to be a buffer for broken people. You were born to forge a life ruled by your own values, not by their fleeting moods. Machiavelli wouldn't offer comfort in such a state. He'd awaken you. He'd declare, when they expect you, disappear. When they depend on you, detach. When they assume you're theirs, remind them you belong to no one. Because the man who cannot disrupt expectations will forever be shackled by them. You believe explaining yourself makes you noble. But in the eyes of those who manipulate your explanations are confessions. Your transparency is ammunition. And your kindness devoid of selectivity is nothing more than a leash, breaking the pattern. So what's the move? Break the rhythm. Interrupt the predictable pattern. Withdraw without a single warning. Let them wonder what precisely shifted. Let them feel the gaping void they once pretended didn't matter. Let their cozy comfort with your constant availability collapse into a stark discomfort with your newfound boundaries. This is the path to regaining control. It's about replacing predictability with tactical silence by answering only when it genuinely serves you. It's remembering that access to your mind, your time, and your energy isn't a right, it's a reward. So the next time you feel that relentless pressure to respond, pause. Ask yourself, does this person truly deserve a piece of my inner world, or are they merely addicted to the version of me that never ever says no? If the answer isn't a clear, resounding yes, then it's a strategic no. This isn't cruelty, this is clarity. This isn't ego, this is sovereignty. If these words sting good, let them. Let them burn through the very parts of you that were meticulously built to be controlled. And if you're ready to dismantle the obedient version of yourself that was taught to serve without limits, consider this: my predictability is my enemy. And subscribe not to follow another voice, but to fortify your own. Because from this precise moment onward, you are not their solution. You are not their convenience. You are a man in command, the currency of energy. In every war, the sharpest generals never squander their forces fighting every single battle. They don't waste precious arrows on mere illusions. They calculate, they conserve, they strike with lethal precision. Why? Because their most formidable weapon isn't the sword itself. It's the sheer energy to wield it at the exact right moment. Now bring that wisdom to your own life. Every casual conversation you entertain, every petty insult you bother to respond to, every tiny emotional fire you extinguish for others. It all costs you something. And most men are utterly unaware they're being perpetually robbed. They wake up exhausted not from exertion but from exposure. Exposure to people who drain them dry, to situations that weaken their resolve, to habits that leak their vital energy drop by agonizing drop until nothing but a bitter resentment remains. Machiavelli wouldn't label that burnout. He'd call it strategic failure. Because the man who squanders his power on trivial skirmishes will find nothing left when the true war inevitably arrives. And make no mistake, your energy is not infinite. It is currency. And precisely who you choose to give it to is a direct reflection of whom you truly obey. Carljung once posited, every thought, every emotion draws from a limited reservoir. But Machiavelli pushes this even further. He doesn't just protect energy, he weaponizes it. He wields it like a king, deploys his gold not for generosity but to gain advantage. You may genuinely believe you're being noble by consistently showing up, by responding to every desperate cry for attention, by defending yourself in meaningless arguments. But here's the brutal truth. Every single time you react, you are being profiled, mapped, predicted, controlled. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They simply need you to waste yourself. And you do it willingly, all in the name of kindness. But what you're actually doing is surrendering your kingdom. Machiavelli would never permit that. He'd instruct you, withdraw your energy from the useless. Let fools destroy themselves in the silence you no longer break. Because when you stop giving them precisely what they crave, your validation, your time, your attention, you become dangerous. They'll inevitably call you cold, distant, selfish. But Machiavelli would simply smile, because now you are no longer predictable. You are no longer easily provoked. You have become unreadable, and the unreadable man, he becomes ungovernable, guarding your inner fire. You were never meant to pour yourself out like a public fountain, perpetually accessible to all. You were forged to guard your inner fire like a fortress. Because when your energy is sacred, your presence becomes rare. And when your presence becomes rare, it becomes power. So here is your absolute command. Stop defending yourself in pointless battles. Start conserving yourself for the real ones. The next time someone demands your reaction, pause. Ask yourself, do they genuinely seek resolution or do they simply crave control? If the answer flickers even slightly unclear, default to silence. Not because you're weak, but because you are definitively done being played. If this hits home, consider this: my energy feeds no fools. And subscribe if you're truly ready to defend your power, not with noise, but with ruthless, absolute clarity. Because from here on out, you don't react. You calculate, you conserve, you rise. Silence, the ultimate weapon. Silence is not retreat. It is not surrender. And it sure as hell is not weakness. Silence is a setup. It is a trap intricately wrapped in stillness. It is the weapon of those who no longer dance to the cacophony of others' demands. Machiavelli never perceived silence as mere absence. He saw it as camouflage. He wrote, "The wise man does not need to lie, he only needs to withhold." Because in a world where everyone is shouting, the man who says nothing becomes a threat. When you choose silence, you violently disrupt the established pattern. You deliberately remove yourself from their script. You become unreadable. And what people cannot read, they absolutely cannot control. Those who once showered praise on your goodness, your availability, your kind heart, will begin to squirm when you no longer play along. They used to call you kind. Now they'll label you distant. They used to say you were dependable. Now they'll accuse you of changing. But grasp this fundamental truth: they were never genuinely complimenting your character. They were complimenting your compliance. They didn't admire you, they admired their control over you. Machiavelli understood this intimately. He believed that when silence enters a room, it doesn't calm people, it exposes them. He'd assert, "Silence doesn't confuse the strong, it only terrifies the manipulative." Because silence shatters the comfortable mirror, and those who once used you to see a reflection of their own convenience and comfort now see only themselves, and most cannot bear what stares back. They loved you precisely as long as you were predictable, as long as you served as their echo chamber, their perpetual rescuer, their convenient distraction. But when you fall silent, they are forcibly confronted with the emptiness they were skillfully hiding behind your very presence. And this, my friend, is where the mask collapses, the unraveling of illusion. The very ones who smiled to your face will accuse you. They'll brand your silence as arrogance, your boundaries as cruelty, your essential growth as betrayal. But do not react, because in that precise moment you are witnessing their meticulously constructed illusion unravel before your eyes. Carljung termed it the breakdown of the persona, the elaborate mask we wear to be accepted, to be liked, to feel safe. But Machiavelli would frame it with far greater precision. He'd state, "Only when the mask falls does the game truly begin. Because now you are not who they want you to be. You are who you choose to be. Not polite, not predictably available, but powerful. You no longer explain. You no longer soothe their anxieties. You no longer respond merely to keep a superficial peace. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them spiral into their own conjectures. Let them dig their own psychological graves, desperately trying to decode your stillness. Because the greatest exposure doesn't spring from confrontation, it blooms from withdrawal. So here is your internal command. Do not explain, do not chase, do not clarify. Let the silence speak. Let it rattle the very foundations of those who built their sense of worth on your unwavering obedience. If this speaks to the part of you that is utterly done performing, consider this. My silence is the end of their illusion. In a world utterly addicted to noise, silence is an act of rebellion. And in the relentless game of power, silence is dominance. When you cease to react, you don't merely avoid chaos, you control it. You flip the entire board. You walk away from the very rules they tried to bind you with. Suddenly they have no clue what you're thinking. They don't know how to trigger you. They don't even know if you're still in the game. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is not always necessary to strike. Sometimes not moving at all is the most terrifying strike of all." Because when you consciously withhold your response, you create immense pressure, a vacuum that compels the other side to talk more, to reveal more, to panic more. And in that very panic, they tragically give themselves away. Most people have been meticulously trained to respond instantly to every insult, every provocation, every emotional bait. Because the second you react, they've got you. You're no longer sovereign. You're being pulled by invisible strings. But when you resist, when you utter nothing, they collapse under the sheer weight of their own projections. Because manipulators utterly despise silence. They can't use it, they can't control it, and they absolutely cannot predict it. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove a single thing. You don't need to win arguments. Because silence is the death of their narrative. It unravels their manipulation without you lifting a single finger. Carljung believed silence connects you to your true self. But Machiavelli would take it a step further. He'd say it disconnects your enemies from theirs. It turns their aggression inward. It allows them to destroy themselves in the profound void you deliberately left behind. This isn't weakness. This is siege warfare, psychological dominance through absolute stillness. They spend, you conserve, they attack, you observe, they burn out, you sharpen. So here's the unbreakable rule. He who speaks first exposes first. He who reacts loses the frame. But he who holds his silence owns the moment. Let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. Let their own desperate words echo back with no reply to hide behind. Because in silence you reveal everything while simultaneously showing nothing. If this resonates deep within you, consider this: my silence commands. The architecture of self-respect. You were conditioned to justify your silence, to apologize for setting boundaries, to defend your intrinsic need for solitude. You were explicitly taught to ensure everyone else feels comfortable, even if it meant a profound betrayal of your own inner peace. But Machiavelli would call this a fatal mistake. He wrote, "He who justifies his every step gives others the right to question it. And once they feel entitled to question it, they will never stop." Every single time you utter, "I'm sorry I didn't reply," or "I was just overwhelmed," you tragically reinforce a dangerous illusion that you somehow owe them an explanation for living life on your own terms. But you don't. You never did. Your silence is not an offense. It's a declaration. Your boundaries are not cold or cruel. They are the intricate architecture of your self-respect. Your detachment is not arrogance. It's the profound recalibration of a man who finally sees how much he's given and how little was ever truly returned. The moment you cease explaining, you reclaim something sacred: authority over your own narrative. Because when people become accustomed to your constant explanations, they cease to respect your instincts. They begin to expect you to justify every single move you make. And when you don't, they panic. But that, my friend, is their discomfort, not your obligation. You are not here to soothe everyone's fears. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be clear, clear about who you are, clear about what you tolerate, clear about precisely who gets access to you. Machiavelli knew this well. He famously stated, A ruler must choose between being loved and being respected. Only one of these ensures order. Far too many men choose to be loved, and in doing so, they become emotional servant slaves to perception. They lavish their precious energy on everyone except themselves. But clarity is a sword, and silence is its sheath. You wield both when you finally stop defending your peace. So the next time someone says you've changed, just smile. Not because they're wrong, but because they finally noticed. You're not here to be perpetually accessible. You're not here to be easily explainable. You are here to evolve, and evolution doesn't arrive with a permission slip, so let them speculate. Let them misinterpret, let them concoct elaborate stories to explain what they're no longer permitted to access. Because every man who ascends into true sovereignty must first confront the raw guilt of no longer being endlessly available to those who only ever loved his obedience. If you've felt this profound shift in your soul, if you know this transformation is happening in real time, then carve this truth into your very identity. I owe no explanations for protecting my peace. The pain of purification. There's a specific kind of pain few men ever speak about. It doesn't stem from betrayal or failure or even profound loss. It originates from the silence that inexorably follows your withdrawal. You stop replying. You stop explaining. You meticulously step out of the confining roles they cast you in, and suddenly the relentless noise fades and an unfamiliar stillness begins to settle. At first it feels like pure freedom. Then it morphs into nagging doubt. And then it hits you, the deep-seated loneliness, the profound emptiness, the unfamiliar quiet where their incessant expectations used to reside. You begin to question yourself. Did I go too far? Was I too cold? Did I just destroy the very bridges I needed? But Machiavelli would meet you in that silence with something far colder than comfort. He'd declare, power is not born in applause, but in isolation. And isolation is not punishment, it is purification. This isn't the pain of losing people. It's the pain of losing the version of you who craved their approval, who lived for their validation, who lingered in suffocating rooms just to feel useful. You're not suffering from solitude. You're suffering from withdrawal, from the insidious addiction of being needed, from the deceptive comfort of being expected, from the hollow illusion of being liked. Because every single time you said yes just to avoid tension, you implicitly said no to yourself. Every time you showed up merely to prove your goodness, you stepped further away from what truly made you powerful. Machiavelli would call this precisely what it is: a strategic death, the kind of death that unfailingly precedes rebirth. Because until the obedient version of you dies, the sovereign one simply cannot emerge. Let it hurt. Let it burn. Let the desperate echoes of your old self scream in futile protest. Because that profound ache you feel right now, it's not weakness, it's detox. And what is powerfully rising in that sacred void is something far more dangerous than anything they've ever encountered before. A man who no longer needs permission. A man who doesn't explain. A man who disappears and then returns as his very own force of nature. Carljung called this individuation the profound process of integrating your fragmented self into something whole, powerful, and authentic. But Machiavelli would frame it as a transfer of power. Not power given to you, but power taken by you from the clutching hands of those who once fed on your desperate need to be seen. It will be uncomfortable. It will feel utterly unnatural. But then again, so does every truly great transformation. The majestic lion isn't born in a bustling crowd. He's born in solitude. He roars not for approval, but because he finally remembers his own resonant voice. So don't run from the pain. Stand resolutely in it. Let it cut. Let it cleanse. Let it crown you. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion of them. And in doing so, you found yourself. If you feel this profound shift rising from deep within your core, then consider this: my solitude is my sanctuary. Scarcity, presence, and unforgettable power. There's a critical difference between merely being seen and being remembered, between simply being around and being respected, between being liked and being truly valued. Most men tragically confuse fleeting attention with lasting influence. But Machiavelli grasped something far deeper. He wrote, "The prince who is always seen becomes ordinary, but the one who controls when and how he appears becomes unforgettable." Your presence used to be constant, predictable, accessible. And that, my friend, made you convenient, not powerful. Because what is always available loses its inherent mystery. What is always accessible loses its sharp edge. And what is always present eventually becomes invisible. You showed up even before they wondered about you. You responded even before they had a chance to miss you. You explained even before they had a single question. And in doing so, you meticulously trained them to treat you like a background character in your own life. But here's the crucial truth no one ever explicitly told you. Scarcity creates value. Distance and absence, when deliberately intentional, are not liabilities. You don't need to vanish completely. You need to become strategic with your presence. When you speak too often, your words lose their gravity, their weight. But when you speak less, every single sentence lands with the force of an earthquake. When you are everywhere, you become noise. But when you appear only when it truly matters, you become a signal. Machiavelli would call this calculated absence. Not to play games, but to build gravity, to cultivate an aura of significance. He would advise, let them feel your absence so they vividly remember the cost of your presence. This isn't manipulation. This is asset protection. Your time, your energy, your mind, your emotional bandwidth. These are not donations, they are investments, and not everyone qualifies for them. So here's your new unwavering standard. Not everyone gets a reply. Not everyone gets an explanation. Not everyone earns your precious presence. The more they assume you'll show up, the more you must challenge that very assumption. Because when they don't know where you stand, they begin to instinctively feel your power. Think about gold. Its immense value isn't derived from how brightly it shines. It's in how rare it is, how meticulously protected it is, how incredibly difficult it is to truly reach. So ask yourself, why should your presence be any less valuable? Why should your attention be handed out like a free sample? The man who is always seen is soon forgotten. But the man who chooses when to enter, how to speak, and when to vanish becomes a presence they fear to waste. This is not arrogance. This is sovereignty. This is the behavior of kings, of men who don't exist for convenience but for consequence. From this moment forward, your attention is currency. Your presence is leverage. Your absence is a stark reminder. So ask with every message, every meeting, every interaction, is this person earning my presence or merely expecting it by default? And if you feel that fundamental shift within you, consider this: my presence is earned, the war for self-command. What you've just navigated is not a guide to being liked. It's not self-help, it's not therapy. This is war, a psychological war, a war between who you were meticulously trained to be and who you are now compelled to become. Machiavelli never promised peace. He promised clarity. He didn't teach comfort. He taught control. He didn't value kindness without power. He valued power disguised as kindness and then decisively withdrawn when kindness transforms into a leash. If you've truly paid attention, you now grasp one brutal truth that governs everything. A man who does not command himself will be commanded by others. And command begins with one pivotal act: withdrawal. Withdrawal from weakness, from over-explaining, from emotional servitude, from being the man who shows up for everyone but his own damn self. When you withdraw, you create distance. And in that distance, you become mysterious, unreadable, uncontrollable. That's the unshakable foundation of real power. Because when you no longer respond on demand, they don't just question where you went. They question what they lost. And when you no longer justify your decisions, you don't just create boundaries, you create standards. The moment you cease chasing clarity in others, you begin building unwavering certainty within yourself. You stop performing. You stop apologizing. You stop explaining your evolution to people who only ever knew your obedience. Machiavelli would tell you this power is not granted, it is taken. And it is sustained not by brute force, but by precise calculation. You are not here to be emotionally available. You are not here to be understood. You are not here to be endlessly accessible. You are here to lead your own inner state like a kingdom, to decide who enters, who stays, and who never gets a key again. This is the Machiavellian man. He doesn't explain, he doesn't react, he doesn't beg to be seen. He speaks when it serves him. He vanishes when it strengthens him. And he returns only when the terrain undeniably favors his move. Your new life doesn't begin with applause, it begins in silence. And it culminates in dominance, not over others, but over the one thing that has always been stolen from you, your self-command. From this point forward, let others gossip. Let them speculate. Let them miss you. But you withdraw. You observe. And you return only when it serves you. Because as Machiavelli knew, the game doesn't belong to the honest. It belongs to the prepared. And now, you are.